important dimensions of the European coexistence and building of a common European community. Actually, our institute was supposed to cooperate in this project at a purely organizational level, because the project is held by the Technical University of Darmstadt. It's not a consortium. But unfortunately, there was some red tape on both sides, and we didn't manage to get involved. But that didn't. Okay, great, thank you. Didn't produce any difficulties, and actually the project was the panels were organized, and as I heard, very well organized in Greece. So we are now very happy to hear about the preliminary findings of this interesting project, and also the methodological approach that was adopted. And we are eager to hear about and get some details on this project. So I have just to remind the persons that follow online that the event is recorded, and that it will be available on the YouTube channel of ECHE. Professor Heinelt, dear Hubert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's really a pleasure for me to be back in Athens again. I'm working with colleagues in Greece since the early 1980s, and to present, as Professor Tsekos already said, preliminary results of our research project. We started last April, and we have a funding period of 3 years, so we are just somehow at the beginning. The focus group discussions, our main empirical phase has been finished, and we have now started the analysis of the translated transcription of the focus group discussions. Difficult to, sorry, there's a technical problem.
I suppose we can resolve it. It's here. Sir.
Okay, fine. I hope that everyone is now seeing the presentation. How to move? Yes, the structure. I will start with outlining our starting points and the research question. Then we will explain why we used a specific empirical instrument, namely focus group discussions, for answering the research question. How they have been conducted will be explained by Petros, and then I will briefly also come to some preliminary results on the two main concepts. What do Europeans understand when they are talking about solidarity and reciprocity? And both are linked to certain concepts of fairness. Okay, and then we will come to some narratives in which this understandings of people are connected in different countries, and if the time is allowing it, we can also present some additional results. So I think we got our project funded because our starting point and research question was attractive for the funders. We argued, well, when you are looking at opinion polls, you find a lot of results what European in different countries from different milieus think about solidarity, reciprocity, and fairness. That's fine. But is it really enough? We argued we have to find the reasons why the respondent answered yes or no. What does it mean to say yes or no when the question is asked, is the exchange of funding fair among member states, and so on. So the meaning of people in regard to solidarity, reciprocity, and fairness, that should be uncovered by our project, or what is the reasoning behind this simple yes or no answers. To uncover these different meanings of solidarity, reciprocity, and fairness, we conducted focus group discussions. And we assume that when we get statements about the reasons why something particular is behind this yes or no answers, we hope that we can also detect whole narratives about European integration. Is it fair? Is some standard of solidarity and reciprocity met or not? So, focus group discussions. I do not know if you are aware about this instrument. We can talk a lot. We did it last week at the Kapodistrias University, and it was an endless debate. But we can do it in the debate after the presentation, if you like. I will concentrate on main points. Focus group discussions are aiming at uncovering interactions in real time, in real life situations. So what is happening when people from particular milieus are meeting in a tavern and talking about Europe? The same applies for other milieus in a yacht club. So people talking there, exchanging their ideas about this concepts. This is the advantage. You can also use citizen panels, but citizen panels have the disadvantage that the group gathered for this discussions, the citizen panels, are more or less heterogeneous. There are people from different milieus, and usually they are dominated by particular groups of people. In the German context, it's usually teachers. Teachers are used to talk a lot, and they think they know everything. I do not know how it was in how it is in Greece, but I think I attended some meetings of the panels organized for the conference on the future of Europe. It's also an ongoing project organized by the European Parliament and Commission. This is a real good example for the disadvantages of citizen panels. But the disadvantage, and we will come to this point, of focus groups are that you can only or should only engage a limited number of people, 4 to 8, to give everyone the opportunity and attract everyone to interact with the others like they do when they are met in a tavern. So a citizen panel, in contrast, usually consists of 20 people or even more. So, and this is also a reason why usually the citizen panels are biased. And depending on financial resources, you cannot do a high number of focus group discussions. You have to be selective. So the number of participants is relatively low, and you cannot conduct hundreds of interviews. We did and will have done at the end 27. So selectivity is a disadvantage in regard to milieus, or you have to explain why you choose particular milieus. And this is the reason why potentially the participants are not representative for the whole population. And even for the milieus, it can be difficult because you only select 4 to 8 in Greece for a specific milieus. I will come to the milieus in the next, on the next slide. We selected in each country, we choose for this project 3 groups according to results of Eurobarometer. The first group are high-skilled, higher-paid persons. These are people who usually are in favor of European integration. In a very controversial debate initiated by Wilder, they are called the cosmopolitans. They are benefiting from a globalized economy and European integration, and mostly they have really personally experience with transnational social networks, friends in Greece, business partners in different countries. The other group, low-skilled or lower-skilled, lower-paid and unemployed people. Based on Eurobarometer, this is a group of people who are more skeptical about European integration and globalization in general. They are afraid that they are losing their statuses as workers with a secure job or with a high payment, because they feel under pressure with economic competition stimulated by European integration and in a globalized world in general. So the authors, Søren de Wilde, called them communitarians. I do not like this expression, but they mean this people from this milieu are focused on communities, neighborhoods, their region, and mainly on the nation state. They feel or they hope that they can be protected by the nation state, or even by smaller traditional communities they are linked to. So we decided, well, let's choose this particular milieus and asking these people what is their understanding of solidarity, reciprocity, and fairness. And the third group are young people. We decided to integrate this group because these are usually people who in their own life did not know border controls at all. It's fine, traveling from Greece to Germany without passport control, going by car, going in the past by car from Germany to Greece was a problem, isn't it? as there are some older people who have to register this in your passport. Okay, I will not. And for the countries selected, I will come to it in the next slide, we concentrate on EU member states who are also members of the Eurozone. So these young people, they are familiar with one currency. No problems with changing drachme into lira. So it's easy to live. So the next decision was, in which EU countries should we conduct with this selected 3 groups of people this focus group discussions? We decided members of the Eurozone, because they had to react somehow to the Euro crisis, the so-called Euro crisis. And we selected from this member state the so-called net payers, Finland, Germany, and the Netherlands. The net beneficiaries, Greece, Portugal, and Spain. And an interesting group of countries, they are now beneficiaries of EU funding schemes. But as you will see, the results we have already detected, they are aware that a time can come, due to the positive economic development, that they will pay in the pot from which funds are distributed. So we have 2 Baltic states, Latvia and Lithuania, and Slovakia. Frankly speaking, we would like more to integrate the Czech Republic, because they were even more economically successful, but they are not a member of the Eurozone. Okay, then we choose Slovakia. So I think that's now your part, how the focus group discussions were conducted in the different member states.
It would be easier if you change seats.
So, as Professor Heinelt mentioned before, the research for the HEURIC project took place in 9 different countries from October 2021 to March 2022. 9 young researchers were recruited on a full-time basis from the respective countries. Our main task in this period of time has been to prepare, conduct, transcribe, and interpret the focus group discussion. Occupying 1 young native speaker, researcher from each of the pre-mentioned European countries, gave us several advantages. First of all, we had the opportunity to come together in real time and jointly develop the topic guide, a tool that during the focus group, all moderators used more or less. So almost everybody used the same tool, the same questions, the same structure, and the same scenario in their focus group discussions in all 3 milieux. In addition, the focus groups in each country were conducted in native language rather than in English. That way, the participants were able to express themselves just as they would in a cafe or a restaurant. Thus, we had the opportunity to catch the exact feelings and narratives they wish to express. Last but not least, the transcription. The transcription and the interpretation were done by ourselves, the young researchers. We transcribed in our mother tongue the focus group discussions that we previously moderated, and then we interpreted them in English. That gave us the opportunity to ensure that all the information that was produced during the focus group discussions was available to our project colleagues without losing any crucial parts due to poor translations. After completing this process, each new researcher also wrote the country report for it's young researchers, excuse me, also wrote a country report for their country, which allows for public, political, and scientific debates on the topic of the project to be considered. Each researcher conducted 3 focus group discussions, and each discussion consisted of 4 to 8 participants. In recruiting these participants, the support of local universities or individual professors and researchers was crucial. The project collaborates with such institutions or individual professors and researchers in every country except the Netherlands. These partners conducted people with whom we conducted interviews in the previous projects and their alumni networks. Also, some young researchers conducted local associations to recruit participants. Such a case, in this case, the prerequisite was that these associations had to have potential participants who belonged to all 3 of the pre-mentioned milieus and did not have a political orientation. A typical example of such an association is the fan club of the Darmstadt football team. Finally, the researchers ourselves used our personal networks and personal social media to recruit participants, while at the same time we were ensuring that we did not know the candidate participants personally and we were not related with them in any possible way. As you can see in the table, all the focus group discussions, the participants ranged from 4 to 8. We also collected demographic data on their age, gender, and place of residence, and tried to maintain a relative balance of participants across all countries. As planned from the beginning of the project, the vast majority of the focus groups discussions took place in January and February of 2022. Thus, the biggest obstacle we faced when we returned to our countries to moderate the discussions was the breakout of the Omicron variant pandemic. So, despite the ample resources available to us by the project, we were unable to conduct all the focus groups in person, and many of the moderators resorted to Zoom. In this way, we were able to ensure that focus group discussions were conducted safely, while also acting as a safety net for the participants who wanted to remain isolated due to the pandemic. However, this altered the course of the dynamics. As you can understand, in many cases, 1 or more participants were diagnosed positive to the coronavirus days or even hours before the discussion took place, often resulting in not enough time to find someone suitable to take their place. Another example of the obstacles posed to us by the coronavirus pandemic is the Greek case in the first focus group. Due to my illness from COVID-19 virus, 2 days before my first focus group, I had to do some emergency changes. So based on that, my research assistant took over the in-person running of the event, while I moderated the discussion from home via Zoom. But that was a good lesson, I think, because recalling the course of all 3 discussions I moderated, in the first one, the participants were more tense and distant, and it was almost impossible to develop a long-lasting dialogue between them. In contrast, in the face-to-face discussions, the participants had the opportunity to get to know each other, and me personally, during the coffee break preceding the focus group. And that is a feeling that you can get by reading all the 3 transcripts. For example, the first transcript, the first discussion lasted for about 1 hour and 20 minutes and stuff like that. And the other 2 were almost 2 hours because participants were feeling more comfortable talking to someone who is present, and it's not like presenting himself from Zoom. I think you can take over.
So for getting an understanding for the background of the results I will present in a few minutes, we have to tell you that it's a focus group discussion. We focused on topics. In a citizen panel, it's quite flexible. You can start talking and you can talk about the future. What we did, we focused on different scenarios and asked people, what do you expect? What should be done? What can you do? What should your country do in the cases of a natural disaster, an economic crisis like the Euro crisis, social and regional disparities within the EU, but also in individual member states, and in respect to unemployment. So we focus. This is the basic idea of focus group discussion, to ask people in respect to the specific issues about their understanding of solidarity, reciprocity, and fairness. And as I already mentioned, the expected actions, reactions, were also directed to the EU, the member states, the own member state, and themselves. So, based on this scenarios, which the moderator started with, I can skip this and go just to the first slide with preliminary results. Talking about these 4 scenarios: natural disaster, economic crisis, social disparities, unemployment, it was surprising for us that the participants in all focus group discussions had a clear understanding of the difference between solidarity and reciprocity. There is a lot of academic debate about these concepts, and the essence of it is really also present when people are talking about these 3 concepts. So solidarity is assistance without expecting a reward and reflecting on the reasons about the needed help in the case of a natural disaster. This is different when it comes to reciprocity. There is willingness of assistance with the expectation of a reward, maybe not now, but maybe in an uncertain future. Rawls is ringing. So a give and take relation, and considering also the reasons of the needed help and deservingness. As one of the participants clearly argued, well, if someone, a country, is needing help, there is a history when it comes to an economic crisis, to social disparities and unemployment. It's different with a natural disaster. It has no history, it happens suddenly, and nobody can make responsible for it. In some focus group discussions, it was argued, well, there are year by year wildfires in Greece, and why should we help every year? They should take care. But this is not the usual case. In a case of a natural disaster, it's a human responsibility to help and not reflecting on rewards or the reason for deservingness. But deservingness, the construction of deservingness, also a debate in social sciences since a long time. Father Ingram, it's ringing. This is, even by ordinary people, quite clear when it comes to economic crisis, social disparities, and unemployment. So, solidarity, to summarize already here, is clearly something which is seen as necessary when nobody can blame that someone or a historical development which is created by people has was a background for it. But in the other cases, scenarios, we called it, reciprocity plays a role. Give and take is in the background, but it's the forefront. Who is to blame that this need which is popping up is there? Now I will come also to some quotes. In most of the focus group discussion, but particularly in Finland and the Baltic state, reference was made to work ethic. Post-war Finland and our parents' generation and grandparents have had a very high work ethic. And this Protestant work ethic, Max Weber is ringing, the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, isn't it? Ordinary people do not may know about Max Weber, but about the concept performed well. So, and then, yes, the banana republics around the Mediterranean, there it's different. So this is the reason for blaming others and emphasizing that there may be reciprocity, but there are reflections about deservingness. Another kind of blame is related to politicians, but also to the people who elected this awful, corrupt, or incompetent politicians. It is our own responsibility choosing our politician who again determines the economic path of the country. That's a statement is of a Lithuanian woman, business student. This means it's your own fault because you did not elect the right politicians. In a different way, this was also emphasized in Portugal. I will come back to it in a few minutes, but it's also very clear in the focus group discussions articulated in Slovakia. So you are in a problematic situation. Well, isn't it your own fault? A third common way of blaming, it's the own government, the EU, and the other member states, the Germans. Here it's a real passage from a focus group discussion in Spain. I will not read it. You can read it from the screen. And after the moderator intervened, when you say they have taken away from us the industry, the shipyards, who do you mean? The government and the European Union. They meaning the European integration, have dismantled the whole industry. I think we haven't found such a good quote in the translated transcription from the focus group discussions conducted in Greece, but the same, I think, could also be expected in the Greek cases. Not in our focus groups, but I think you are aware about debates in your country. I think you are. This is a typical blame game. So, summarizing this first, I think interesting finding of the project, depending on who is blamed for what, support from certain actors, other member states or the EU is considered fair and demanded or questioned. So the concept of fairness, to emphasize also already here, is more linked to the concept of reciprocity. When it comes to solidarity, fairness is not so an issue. You have to help because it is a natural disaster for which nobody can make accountable. It happened, and we have to help. There is the expectation that others would also help. And interestingly, it's not written down on the slides, this concept of solidarity articulated by most of our participants is not only related to EU member states. I remember a quote from a Greek, if it happens in Turkey, an earthquake, of course, we will help. Okay. This statements on solidarity, reciprocity, and fairness that was already expected, and we found it already confirmed, linked to particular narratives. This narratives in the interpretation, in the presentation now is linked to countries, but I think, for example, the Fado narrative can also be present in countries like Greece. So we detected this 5 narratives. How much time do we have?
It's up to you. We have 2 hours.
So I will start with the first, and if you are interested in getting informed about all, I can present all, or I can be selective. Before I will start the presentation about the narrative detected so far, this has to be mentioned. Narratives became more and more of interest in social sciences, particularly also in policy analysis, since the 1990s. There is the so-called narrative policy framework, which got more and more attention. And the core assumption of this approach is human beings are storytelling animals. So first of all, it's an actor-centered approach. It's not structure, driving forces. Actors are important. They can change the world. They are constrained by structures, but actors matter. And actors, in contrast to the rational choice approach, are storytelling animals. They are interacting communicatively with others, trying to develop a common, and in some cases, hegemonic understanding of what the reason for problems, the causes are, and what appropriate, visible perspectives of actions could be, and which choices, policy choices, should be taken. So behind this narrative policy framework, it's an actor-centered approach, but it's focused on the interaction of actors. It's not the homo economicus who is considering what is feasible, what is my desire. My preferences, desires and preferences are developed, formed collectively through communication. So this as a background, the different narratives we found. Do you know Fado? Okay. Typical Portuguese songs. It's an immaterial world heritage in the meantime. And if you go through these bullet points, we were a great nation in the past. We choose a way to Europe after we have turned away from the Atlantic, the colonies. This brought many development opportunities for Portugal with the structural funds, cohesion policy. However, and now the blaming, we have not taken advantage of these opportunities, unlike the new member states in Eastern Europe. All the money was sunk into the swamp of corruption of the parties that have been created, this corruption. However, it is our fault because we could have voted these parties out of office. Instead, only half of the eligible voters in Portugal are taking part in the general election. So the whole story is an unfortunate tragedy. That's Fado. And it's resulting in a pessimistic and also, yes, not a very straightforward, action-oriented attitude. It's a tragedy. We have to live with it. No. Where is the... I can't, here I have. I want to go next to the opposite narrative found in Slovakia, but maybe also detectable in other countries. We named it we can make it narrative. Again, we are happy that we have found our way back to the West, and successfully so. This brought a lot of support from the EU, particularly to the cohesion policy. However, we have not taken advantage of this opportunity for the best of all. Much of the money that the country has received as support from the EU, and thus other countries, have been embezzled through corruption. However, we can and will change this by kicking out the corrupt elite. And if you are looking for the Slovak Republic, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, this is really happening when you are looking at elections. There are some very strange figures, but there is a changing minority in parliament in the struggle to push this corrupt elite out of office. We can do it. We as a people of Slovakia can do it, and we should do it. So, two countries where we have detected so far two narratives in parallel. We can do it, similar to the narrative in Slovakia, and we can't narrative. Spain and Greece. Again, the EU access was a desirable way back to the West. In Greece, it was clear when Western integration was a core idea. This was also the idea in Spain after getting lost of or coming back to democracy. Again, there were a lot of disadvantages because the economy was not competitive enough. Therefore, not all advantages of European market integration could be made. On the other hand, many development opportunities were not used. And there is this "we can do it" narrative. Let's kick out the corrupt and incompetent elite. This was particularly found in the focus group discussions in both countries with the first milieu, the high-paid, high-qualified, the cosmopolitans. And the other narrative existing in parallel in these countries, mainly to be found among the lower paid or low paid, lower educated and unemployed people, time is over. We will never be able to take advantage of European market integration. It's capitalism, stupid. And this is resulting in a kind of attentism. Let's see what the future will bring. At the moment, we can do nothing, but maybe the white knight, a new leader of what color ever, will come and change. But at the moment, there is no perspective. I think if you're considering the political debate in your country, we found in our focus group this discussion well reflected. So we made it, but we can do even better. The Baltic states. Again, EU access brought us back to the West. So the integration, the way to the West, whatever that meant, it means, is also prevailing there. This way to the West entailed a lot of freedom, not only liberties, but particularly free movement. And financial support was also mentioned and emphasized. And we have taken advantage of these opportunities and will continue to develop successfully. There is a conviction that this will happen. However, there is the awareness that all funding of infrastructure, that's now the quotation, will not be there all the time. Other countries of the European Union will need help, and then we will have to help. We have to help. But last bullet point, emphasized by a member of the first focus group, the well-paid and cosmopolitan people, you should be aware that Lithuanians do not like to share their resources. We have to help, but we will not help if we do not, we are pressed, forced to help. This is not really a spirit of solidarity, isn't it? It's more blaming the others that they still not have taken advantage of all what has been offered to countries and people in need. So now we detected it only so far for Finland. Let's wait for the results we will get for Germany. And the Netherlands, we called it the "we are pissed off" narrative. we have helped a lot. We are still willing to achieve economic and particularly social cohesion, because this is a basic for political cohesion. This is quite often this narrative used in EU publication, and it's popping up. It was popping up in our focus group discussion. But there is the arguments about deservingness and has a proper use of the redistribution of funding has made in all member states. And again, emphasizing the Protestant work ethic. And if you have ever read Max Weber, the Almighty, in the spirit of Protestant, do not know mercy. If you do not have taken advantage of all the talents offered you by the Almighty, no mercy, go to hell. This is really popping up was popping up in our focus group discussions. So enough is enough. And politically, let's use the money of the EU budget for modern Green Deal measures or research and development policy instead of traditional policies, the common agricultural policy or cohesion policy. This were clear statements in all focus group discussions we conducted so far in Finland, and let's see what will happen, what we can find for Germany and the Netherlands. And now I'm coming to my last slide. I'm editing a book, was already sent to the publisher, about the last negotiations about the midterm financial perspective. You know, there is a 7-year EU budget, and it has to be agreed, and it was very, very difficult to expect that an agreement, an unanimous agreement could be reached by all 27 member states, because there were this particular discourse communities, the frugal force. And as you remember, the news in the press in 2020 and the years before, they named themselves the frugal force, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Austria. And we can easily imagine Finland and Germany that they could join this group, and you have the others. So somehow we would argue from the results we found so far, in this debate, the reasoning of people is resonated. It's not only the people from these different milieus we integrated in the focus group put forward the argument I presented before. It resonates through elections, of course, the public debate in the countries, in the position of the governments in these negotiations. And coming back, solidarity and natural disaster. What happened in 2020? Until the end of 2020, the budget had to be decided. Until the outbreak of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, it was hard to expect that a compromise could be reached. But against the background of this disaster, not only the budget for the upcoming 7 years were agreed, but additional 750 billion for the recovery fund. And the recovery fund somehow made it easier to find compromises on the cohesion policy. Agricultural policy was not so much detect, but also to address the Green Deal policy. So a lot of money was additionally mobilized, and this made it easy to find at the end a compromise on the budget for the years 2021 to 2027. So many thanks for your attention.
Okay. Thank you, dear Hubert, Professor Heinelt, for the very, very interesting presentation, both on the methodological approach and also Petros elucidated, underlined some of these methodological points, but mostly on the content of your very, very interesting research. I think we are lucky to hear this preliminary findings and in-depth discussion. It's going to begin based on. I'm sure that this is going to happen based on these findings. So now we're entering a question and answers session part. The floor is the audience, both here in the ECHE premises and online. If there are any questions, you could speaking to the online participants. You could, okay, Mr. Again with Mr. Tsatsanis. Okay, Mr. Tsatsanis, can you hear? You can.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a bit. I can. Okay. So I can ask a question. Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Now we can.
Hi. Okay. Well, my name is Manos Tsatsanis. I'm a researcher at ECHE. Unfortunately, I wanted to be there today, but there's a strike for the metro, so I didn't have the ability to be there in person. I apologize for that. Thank you very much, both of you, for the very interesting presentation. And
so we have difficulty to understand you.
Sounds a bit low. Could you speak louder?
Can you hear me now? If I speak closer to the mic?
Approach the mic.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Is the sound very faint?
Yes. I think.
Ακούγομαι. Δεν ακούγομαι.
Ακούγεστε πολύ χαμηλά. Very, very low.
Μήπως είναι και τα ηχεία, γιατί εδώ μου λέει ότι δουλεύει το μικρόφωνο.
Okay. It's we cannot hear the online questions. Mr. Tsatsanis,
I do.
Perhaps it's the. Would we use those?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Just a minute, we're going to use a pair of. Okay. Can you repeat your question now?
Yes. Ακούγομαι τώρα?
Okay.
Ωραία. Thank you very much. I just apologize for not being there. There is a strike on the metro line, so I wasn't able to get to Eke today. And I want to thank you both for your very interesting presentation. So I won't waste any more time. Just 2-3 questions. The first question is about the process of recruitment. I mean, you briefly explained your recruitment strategy. I just had a brief question because, I mean, obviously for your third milieu, it's really straightforward to select young people, but for the first two, as far as I can understand, that there needs to be some kind of variation on 2 or 3 variables, which is skill level, income level, if I understood correctly, high income versus low income, but also attitudes towards the European Union. So I understand that the recruitment was mostly based on personal and professional networks. If not, perhaps you could clarify. But how did you sort out your participants based on these variables? I mean, did you fill the questionnaire before? How did you know about their attitudes towards the European Union, for example, in order to classify them? My second question was whether you actually presented to them any hypothetical scenarios, let's say by removing the names of countries, which would prevent, national stereotypes and stereotypical narratives from blending in or sipping into the discussion when, forming these perceptions of fairness. I mean, my interest would be, let's say, participants from different countries being presented with a identical hypothetical scenario of a crisis, or without the names of countries necessarily being involved, so as to uncover perhaps different culturally determined understandings of solidarity or fairness or things like that. So I was wondering if you did anything of that sort. And my final question is whether the regional component in terms of those narratives was stronger in relation to the demographic component, whether the variation on the socio-demographic variables had anything to do with the different narratives adopted. I mean, in your presentation, as far as I could tell, most of the narratives were nationally driven. So people from different backgrounds shared the same narratives, more or less. Is that accurate? So these are my 3 questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking more information about the recruitment. We started from the results of Eurobarometer results, for example. It's clear that specific social characteristics are related to statements. And therefore we choose the first 2 groups, and we try to find people with this social characteristics. Without, and that is of course a weakness, or I would say not a weakness. I think it was positive. Beforehand, we didn't know the attitudes of the chosen candidates or participants towards European integration. We just asked, it was a first step in all countries, our partners for people from these milieus with whom they had contact in previous projects. Here in Greece, we not only collaborated with Professor Tsekos, but also with Nikos Lepas from the National Kapodistrias University. So, and our young colleague, Petros, got these names, he got in contact with his people, asking them, do you like to participate in January in a focus group discussion? That was the first step. Then we considered alumni groups. This, of course, were only relevant for the high-skilled, high-paid group and not for the low-paid and lower qualified group. But at universities where you have an alumni network, you can look for people and asking them to participate. The third step was looking for association like the local football club in Darmstadt. They have a fan club, and such a fan club has not a political bias. They are combining, bringing together people from different milieus and parties. And the advantage was that two members of our team were also part of this fan club. And so they could ask people, do you like to participate? They know about the background of people and ask them, do you like to participate? And then at the final steps, we use social media and what Petros mentioned. But yes, the core point was beforehand we were not sure if we had, for example, in the high qualified, high paid group in Germany, a supporter or even a member of the right-wing populists. We only knew about his social profile and invited him to participate. And the same applied for the other groups. Is this what you wanted to know?
Yes, thank you.
National stereotypes. We were quite aware about this issue, and therefore it was a part of our topic guide Petros talked about when it comes to the point, how should other member states react when it comes to an increase in unemployment? This question was also asked in Finland, Germany, and the Netherlands. So imagine a situation that an economic crisis happened in Germany. Can happen. So it was not only this scenario related to the usual suspects, but also related to the own country or countries who are now not in a position of asking for support. Is this what you wanted to know?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
And finally, yes, narratives. In Spain and not in Spain and in Greece, in the focus group discussion and among the members of the focus group discussions in Spain and in Greece, we detected differences between these two milieus, the globalists and the communitarians. In both countries, the communitarians were more skeptical that their situation in their country will improve. In Spain, I think it could also be expected, but it was not articulated. In Spain, it was argued, we are and we will come even more a nation of waiters and cleaners employed in the tourist sector. So in these two countries, milieus played a role. But surprisingly, in the other countries, we couldn't detect differences between the three milieus. The Fado narrative could be detected in all three groups, and the quite optimistic perspective we detected for the Baltic states were supported also by all member states. To give you an example, when it comes to support in respect to unemployment, we asked precisely the question of a European-wide unemployment funding scheme. As you may remember, this was an issue in 2020 to establish such a scheme. And in the Baltic states, no, we do not use it. We have the freedom of movement, and those who are unemployed in our country can go to other countries where there is a shortage of labor. Or a typical liberal, I would not call it neoliberal, it's a traditional liberal understanding. Investing in education is the best policy against unemployment. And therefore, it's the responsibility of everyone to invest in his own human capital. Why do we need such a bureaucratic monster, a European-wide uninsurance scheme? We didn't expect this. We were more expecting not cleavages, but differences between the milieus. And the same applied for Slovakia. We had made mistakes, but we are able to improve the economic and social development in our country by electing proper politicians. And this will bring us on the safe side. So no cleavages in all countries between the milieus.
That's what I have. Thank you very much.
I have an additional question. Perhaps clarification. But there's no, of course, the results are preliminary. You don't even have the results from Germany and the Netherlands. But you excluded there is a kind of differentiation between the distinction, let us say, between the milieu differentiation south and north. Perhaps it could be a more homogeneous approach between milieus at the southern, east, northern part, and more differentiation in the southern part. Perhaps.
Yes. Just to inform you about an interesting first finding for Germany. During the last 5 days, I was in Latvia, had a lot of time, a nice surrounding, and I read through the transcript. In Germany, there is not this pissed off narrative. Interestingly, there is, and it's also shared among the different milieus, the attitude German economy is export oriented, and therefore we have to ensure everything that the common market is functioning. This can cost something, but the benefits for us are bigger. It's again reciprocity, considering it's a very instrumental attitude. Or what was a quotation? We should not allow that clients will die, clients which potentially will offer us golden eggs. So the Greeks as customers. We cannot let them die. Not really, but economically, maybe also socially, put them in a difficult situation, because perhaps in the near future they will develop. And I was surprised about the expression, the metaphor of golden eggs, because it's not usual in German to use this phrase, but I think it's pointing to a different understanding and ending up in a different narrative, not so strict and radical like what we have found in Finland. It was just a reaction to what is happening in Germany. So a difference is, so you cannot divide between the North and the South and the East European countries who are still, through all the milieus, quite optimistic. We can do it. We will do it. Or in the body, we will do it even better.
So, I would ask you to, so the question can be because already started recording.
I would also like to thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting for us. I have two main questions. One concerning the process of the field. You did give us a point concerning differences between Zoom meetings and the focus groups conducted face-to-face. I would like to ask you if you see constant differences between such groups concerning how the focus group is conducted, either online or face-to-face. And one second question concerning your results. Did you find differences? I mean, let me rephrase. Did you check political orientation of the persons recruited to the groups? Or did you find differences concerning political orientations on your results? I would like to set two parameters. One is political orientation and one other is personal contact or life experiences with other Europeans. Was it a criterion, such criteria for you for recruiting persons, or was it for you a result, those two parameters?
First question, focus groups and in person. And I will try to answer your second.
Yeah. As I explained to you, I conducted 3 focus groups. The one was via Zoom. Actually, it was not exactly via Zoom. My participants were all together in the hotel, and I was asking the questions via Zoom.
They were all together in one room and
Yeah,
not
yes.
different rooms
Yes.
from their house.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, I spotted many differences between having that kind of focus group discussion and a real face-to-face focus group discussion. So Mr. Cooper probably can tell you more because he went through all the transcripts, and most of my colleagues choose to conduct discussions via Zoom completely, everyone from his home, their home. But definitely having these coffee breaks in the beginning and knowing each other, it's something that you can spot in every Greek focus group discussion. Because probably I would ask, I will go to the second scenario, for example, which is about the economic crisis. And somebody will start talking. After that, he or she maybe say, you know what, Nikos can say you more because he's an economist. He told me in the coffee break. So you can have a real discussion at this point. And the second question, you can answer. Yeah, we chose not to have any politicalized person knowingly. But of course, during the focus group discussions, you can either catch narratives that give you a sense about the political orientation of the person, or I think at one point we had explicitly the name of a party that somebody attended some whatever events and stuff like that. But during even my calls and my personal contacts, it was explicitly that we don't want strictly politicalized person to come to our project. You're welcome.
Anything on?
Maybe on the first question, we were as project leaders really afraid that COVID and the shift, I think, of half of the focus group discussions to Zoom would affect very strongly the dynamic. We cannot control it afterwards. But what I have written from I've read through the transcript, the translated transcript, there were no differences between focus group discussions conducted in person and online. But we cannot be sure that there got something lost. Obviously, if people are sitting together and we haven't talked about it, we started the discussions not directly with the scenarios. Half of the time we spent, we called it warm-up phase. It's also important for interviews, but it's even more important for focus group discussions. You cannot start directly with what is your attitude toward people in need when it comes to a natural disaster. So we asked, first of all, write down your first 3 ideas which came to your mind when you hear European Union. So people could start thinking about the topic, and when they exchange their ideas, also, if you like to phrase it in this way, alliances among the participants. So he or she is from the same line of thinking. And we continued. What does it have any meaning that you are a European citizen? Also a very broad question which stimulated the participants in engaging in debates and also in reactions to the others. Or what was the next step? The benefits. Do you think that European integration brought benefits to you and your country? Or in most cases, when you ask such a question, most people would emphasize the benefits. Not everyone, but a lot of participants did it. But then we explicitly also addressed, it was a topic in our topic guide, if people you are talking with in daily life talk about disadvantages of being a member of the European Union. What disadvantages are these? And in this way, before we came to the core part, we were interested in reactions to the scenarios. We stimulated the communicative interaction between the participants. And maybe this is also an explanation why even via Zoom focus group discussions, the participants were quite talkative. So in contrast to citizen panel discussions I attended, where nearly half of the participants say only a few words or nothing. This didn't happen in our focus group discussion. Nearly everyone at the final phase was intervening, and if this has not happened, the young researcher really asked, and what you, Theodore, what do you think? Do you agree with this statement? And so our participant Theodore had to react even if he didn't want to react. But in a small group, it's easier to react than in a group of 20, where you have these dominant teachers or middle class persons who are dominating the debate, and working class people are shy to articulate their opinion. I think this warm-up phase was important, and also that the people know they are among the same people from the same milieu. So they, even when it were Zoom discussions, the participants were quite active. And the Zoom meeting, just an additional remark, had also an advantage. When you do it in person, you can do it in Athens. And you can try, as Petros did, to integrate also people from the surrounding, more not rural, but not urban setting. But in the countries where we were forced to do it online via Zoom, we were able to include also people from more rural areas and not from the urban center of the country. So this is just to consider if you are thinking about focus group discussions. Zoom has advantages, and what is really important is this warm-up phase. You cannot start straight to the point. You have to make the people have to feel fine in this setting, and they know the others, their positions, and are not afraid that the others will shout to them, you are a populist. And so that was not the case. There were quite relaxed communication. If there are no further questions, maybe two other findings, which are maybe of interest, because at least for us it was surprising. Conditionality, an issue particularly in countries like Greece, of support programs, but also in Spain and Portugal. We asked also for conditionality. If support should and would be offered, should they combined with rules which has to be followed? And it was a surprise. People in all countries from all milieus agreed with conditionality. Only in Spain and Greece it was argued, and also through all the three milieus, with more flexibility, not with this rigid, not considering these particular circumstances, but conditionality, it's good. What was the phrase of Lithuanian?
But about conditionality, it was interesting that most people from all three millennia countries were agreeing with conditionality. For example, in case that we need again economic help, or mostly economic help, most of the Greek participants were, yes, there should be some rules. But but always there were some participants that they insisted that there should be more loose rules or not at all rules. But it was really weird that about 70% was okay with the rules.
Another finding was we expected that the idea of EU unemployment scheme, benefit scheme would be supported, particularly from the group of the low-paid, lower skilled and unemployed. It's not the case. Maybe the participants not all knew about this idea, but a man, and I think a low paid person from Portugal argued, why should I pay in a scheme where people in Luxembourg, I have no idea why he spoke about Luxembourg, people who are getting a high unemployment benefit, why should I pay the high unemployment benefit in Luxembourg? So let's do it. That was the main point. The existing structure of unemployment insurance scheme are so different in the EU. They are funded by social benefit, by social contributions or by taxes, which makes a big difference. The benefit levels are so different, how to harmonize and to complement it. So it was quite clear for participants that this was not desirable. And at the end, it was summarized, this will create, at the end, a new bureaucratic monster at the EU level.
So, other questions? We have maybe 20 minutes. Are there any other questions or remarks? Yes.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask whether apart from the economic crisis, whether the refugee inflation issue, if it came up in a way in the focus groups, either as solidarity towards or this question.
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question by Mrs. Marucci so it can be recorded. The question is if immigration issue came up and influenced discussions and opinions expressed.
So we had long discussions when we prepared the topic guide to include a scenario on, not a scenario, on refugees, not only disasters, natural disasters, I do not repeat it, but also focusing on the refugee issue. And at the end, we didn't, because we knew about the different attitudes in the countries already, and we expected that this would simply replicate what we already knew. So people from the Netherlands are not affected by the refugee crisis. Germany is also not affected, but is more open. This is an issue particularly in Greece, Spain and Portugal less, and it was somehow popping up as an issue in Lithuania, because you know about this new route through Belarus. But what we did is, at the end, in the topic guide, it was clearly marked, and the moderator addressed it in the discussion. So we have talked about this in this scenario. What have you missed? And in a number of cases, the refugee crisis was mentioned, but not in all groups, in all countries. but were other issues, the climate change issue. So this was also by the participants emphasized. We should consider this. What does it mean? And I think this is also an important point. Is it perceived as a natural disaster? This could lead to a more to an approach more focused on solidarity, or is it linked to blaming countries for having problems? So I would say it could be another candidate where not blaming is the core issue, but the common reaction to a kind of natural disaster and solidaric action.
Okay, so anything else? No. Okay, so yeah, of course. Yeah.
Was interesting, but it's a presentation. According to my opinion, from what I heard from your presentation, you gave me an impression of accountability coming up. Who should we blame? One point, and a second point, some hierarchical models of coexistence in European Union. Did the persons gave you these impressions that hierarchical orientations came up to the discussion? Who is rich, who is top, who has the power game on European Union, powerful countries and not powerful countries? Did you get such a model of hierarchical structure? My personal conclusion.
Yes. I think this for sure will be an issue for the more detailed analysis of the corpus, which started now, and we will use Max QDA. Maybe some of you are familiar with this program for qualitative text analysis. So far, it was not popping up because you have to be aware that the Baltic, people in the Baltic state and also Slovenia, they are very, they do not feel suppressed. Slovakia, there is a negative attitude towards Brussels. Brussels is what was Vienna in the historical past, so an imperial center. But there is this confidence that they can do something against it. And you maybe remember my figure with the different discourse community, the Visegrad 4 countries. They know they are skeptical about this new empirical powers, but they feel very strong in fighting against them. So it's different. I think I know a little bit the Greek attitude. People there reacting differently. They are more convinced we can do something about the Czech Republic, I think, and we saw it from Slovenia, against the elite, and we are not victims of European integration.
May I ask you for next time?
Yes, I'm quite often in Athens. Maybe I will can have a talk about final results in in 1 year or 1.5 years. Maybe one final remark from my side. Is it possible to go back to the presentation? Yes. So I'm not only an academic, I'm also a kind of political animal. So I'm also reflecting, what does it mean, this fight, politically? It's the last slide. Yes.
And then I have to go back here and no. There's the zoom.
So the question is, if we have detected in our focus group discussion specific narratives in countries, and if it is true that these narratives are resonating to the position of national governments at the EU level, what does it mean that we have this frugal force in Finland and Germany out at the border to join this discourse community, or Germany? You have to consider that Angela Merkel was the president of the council at the time. And the president in such negotiation is expected to promote a compromise. So she hardly could join this frugal force. But with Angela Merkel not in such a position, and a guy like Schäuble in the Ministry for Finance, so these are candidates moving to this discourse community. And if you consider the perspective of the development of the Baltic states or even of Slovakia, I think I'm afraid that, for example, the negotiation of the next midterm financial framework at the end of 2027 will become very, very tough. Because they are now in a position of benefiting a lot from European funding. But what will happen if they should pay? You remember this quotation from this Lithuanian? Yes, it will be tough. Also a personal remark, the only hope that this will not happen is that our findings, and it's a self-critical remark, is based on the selection of specific milieus. So we have on the one hand the cosmopolitans. From such a milieu, you can only expect an attitude which is looking for responsibility. Do they deserve it or not? Is it the personal responsibility to be not unemployed, investing by yourself in your individual human capital and so on? On the other side, we have those who are already known before as European skeptical, unemployed, low paid, lower qualified one, people who are afraid about the whole process going on. I think our findings could be expected. So it's related to the selection of our milieus for the focus group discussion. But I would argue that's maybe true, but which is the milieu which could be support European integration? Which social milieu having the same, sharing the same narrative about their situation and their perspective could be identified? I have no idea. Yes. So this is a more skeptical conclusion I have, but let's see. But the only hope is to identify an actor, a collective actor. Not a collective actor. A collective actor is somehow organized. A milieu, social groupings who are from their perception related to specific social positions more in favor and not in line with this more liberal thinking of the cosmopolitans and the more national, to bring it to the point, the more national thinking of the communitarians. If you if you find such a milieu, please tell me, and maybe we can convince our funders that we could conduct a follow-up project with focus group on such a milieu, which could be more positive and could give us indication which kind of policy proposals should be made which resonate in society, because this is crucial. What are ideas of solidarity, reciprocity linked to European integration which resonate positively in the different societies of the member states? Thank you.
So, I think that we can conclude here. I would like to thank Professor Heinelt and Petros Karpathiou for their presence and presentation, and all of you for being here in the room and online, and for your interesting questions that gave an opportunity for in-depth discussion, more extensive discussion. And we're looking forward to reading the complete analysis and maybe to cooperate with Professor Heinelt and his team in future projects. Thank you for being here. And for us. So, all right. Okay. Stop sharing.